family engagement. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to see if there are some more people who are jumping on. I know it's a busy time of evening here in Australia, very early in the morning for our guest speaker, Patricia, but we're most appreciative that she's come online so early in her day to join us. While we are waiting, I would just like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we're meeting. For myself, that's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also to any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people joining us this evening. And I'd also like to acknowledge that these lands on which we are were never ceded. So I might introduce Patricia. Hopefully there's a few people jumping on and can catch up if people are joining us late. So Patricia Weinzapfel is our guest speaker for this evening's edition of ACSO's Family Engagement webinar series. Patricia recently retired from the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation in Indiana, USA. And for the past 10 years, she served as the district's Executive Director of Family Engagement. So prior to working in education, Patricia spent 15 years in broadcast journalism, which I'm sure would have been very interesting. She graduated from Northwestern University and is the author of Closing the Loop, a powerful and practical guide to school-home communication. Patricia currently works with schools and districts across the United States of America as a school-home communication consultant. So welcome, Patricia, and again, thank you very much for joining us this evening or so early in the morning for you.
Yes, thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you so much to your team for pulling this together and for everyone watching this evening. We have a lot to cover today, so I wanted to just sort of jump right in. Let me share my screen and open the chat. Again, I am so excited to be with you all and just thrilled that you've asked me to do this. I wanted to start today with this. It is a round of applause. A round of applause for all of you educators, because it has been a doozy of a couple of years, hasn't it? I mean, this isn't even the half of it. Call it a hot mess, call it a heavy lift, call it what you will, but it has been absolutely unbelievable. So to get us going today and just to warm up your little fingers, because we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in the chat, what I'd like to do is begin by asking you, how are you all feeling? Are you A, just kind of crazy busy? Are you B, which I like to call oy vey? Or are you C, just absolutely over it? So we'll just wait a few minutes, you guys, if you can get, yep, A and B. And it's okay if you want to be all of them, because that's okay too. We've got a lot of A and Bs. All of the above. David, yep, A, B, and C. Look at all you guys. I do like to watch this one again. I don't know, there's something cathartic about that, even though I would never advocate violence. But, you know, to be honest, it has been unbelievable. There have been a ton of strong emotions floating around there, particularly in education. You know, some of it parents, some of it us, some of it directed at each other. That's led to a lot of stress. And I know you guys are dealing with exactly what we're dealing with here in the US, a lot of burnout. A lot of educators are leaving the profession. And then of course, we still have a lot of fear. I mean, who would have thought a couple months ago that we would have a war going on in the world? And you know, the virus is still very unpredictable too. What that's done really is create a lot of distance. And at first it was physical distance during the pandemic, but what we're left with now is a lot of emotional distance and a lot of cognitive distance. And the question is, you know, how do we really make our way back? And the answer is really simple, but it's also really complex. We make our way back with clear, concise, effective communication. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how we can build bridges using our words. Here are specifically today's goals for the webinar. We're going to identify challenges and barriers to education communications. We're going to practice simplifying our communications. We're going to sort through the information to include and information we can leave out when we're communicating with parents. We're going to talk through some tips for improving our tone so that we're building relationships, and then consider some ideas on how you can check your communications. So this is what we're going to be working on today. If these are today's goals, what are not today's goals? I was floating in a tunnel toward a very bright light, and then a voice told me I had to go back and finish listening to the presentation. We are going to make this as interactive as possible in this virtual setting. So keep your fingers near your keyboard. We're going to be doing a lot of activities. So fire that up and get ready. And we will take questions. If you have questions at all, just go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll address them. So people learn best through stories. You guys probably know that. So I wanted to start with a story. There once was a little girl who dreamed of being a television news reporter. With her family supporting her, she worked really hard, studied writing and journalism, and she got to live out her dream. So there I am, and you can tell it was a humid day because look at that hair there. That's and the camera, I still go to the chiropractor because of that. One day she interviewed a young man and he was the one. And she quickly found herself with 3 children under the age of 2. Not joking. I had a 1-year-old and a set of twins. Nevertheless, she decided to go back to work at the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation, helping other young boys and girls live out their dreams. One day when she got home from work, she opened this letter, and I will let you take a second to read it. Right. You already don't like me, right? Because I'm making you read that. And she thought, what? And she thought, if I don't understand this, maybe other people don't understand this. And if other people don't understand this, how can families possibly understand this? And she came to the conclusion that before we can really begin to have respectful, meaningful conversations with families, they have to understand what we're talking about. And we have to be able to approach them in a partnership way, in a way that's respectful. And just like that, the little girl discovered a new passion, because actually the skills of a broadcast journalist, her skills were the ability to take large amounts of information, like combined sewer overflow, and break them down in ways that are clear and concise and ways that resonate with the viewer, ways that build relationships. And that brings us to today. You didn't know it when you sat down this evening, but you are all going to become broadcast journalists. We are going to take the principles of broadcast journalism, the principles of good communication, and apply them to our communications with families. Okay, here we go. Just to make sure we are all on the same page, I wanted to really look at the definition of family engagement. It's when families are supporting their children in learning, guiding them, and advocating for them. And it really involves building strong, trusting partnerships. So that's family engagement. When we look at the definition of communication, it's the interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information, a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding and creating and sharing meaning. When you look at this definition, this is what we want with families. We want that interchange of information. We want everyone to be able to bring their expertise to the table. So that's why communication is at the heart of family engagement. Why does communication matter? You know, I like to say it allows us to take the veil off of what we do, right? And bring people into the learning process. We need to kind of do that. We need to take off that veil because we need help with the ever-changing world of education. You know, are we wearing a mask today? Are we not wearing a mask? You know, what are we teaching and when are we teaching it? There's so much that changes so quickly in education that from a practical standpoint, we just need help getting the word out. We need help to tell our stories. And maybe right now our story is we still love education. We love children, but we're not doing okay. We need informed advocates. You know, my mom was a nurse. She actually taught nursing, and she has said to me for years, no one should ever go to the doctor alone, right? Because it's hard to be the patient and receive the information and advocate for yourself when you're really emotional. And when you think about it, right now in education, we are actually in the throes of it. All of us, we are in the middle of it. And so it's hard to step back then and advocate, and yet we need that. We need to fight information, because as we've found, if we are not getting out correct information, information will fill the void. We need to feel better about ourselves and our work. How much better would we feel if we felt we had strong partnerships between schools and families? We would feel supported. We would feel like we're not alone. And then finally, in many instances, we need to build or rebuild relationships. Specifically with families, why does communication matter? It matters because families have information and knowledge that we need. Families are the experts in their children. You know, I say all the time, I'm not an expert in algebra, but I'm an expert in Benjamin Weinzapfel. He was one of my twins. And let me tell you, he was a little squirrely. And when he was in elementary school, he was often not on task. So the school held this giant meeting. They were going to figure out how to motivate Benjamin. And they came up with this idea. They were going to offer him free dress. So he went to a public school that required uniforms. Benjamin is lucky he was a twin, so his sister could say, zip your fly. And even to this day, he goes to school in upstate New York, which is freezing. And he's one of those shorts guys, you know, who wears shorts all the time. I mean, he could care less about what he wears. I wasn't at the table when the school came up with this plan. If I had been there with my expertise, I would have said, why don't you let him do his dinosaur origami if he finishes his schoolwork? But I wasn't there. Families are the experts in their family cultures. So if we have students who are going to be the first to graduate, you know, from high school or from, you know, a university, we need to know that so we can wrap supports around that student and their family. Or if we have families, you know, a student that's new to our country, we need to know that so we can wrap supports around that family. Families can change our assumptions and help us become better teachers. I've got a great story about this. We had a teacher at one of our elementary schools who had a young student, a little boy in kindergarten, who was late every morning. And she jumped to the conclusion that because this little boy had a young mom, she felt like, well, this young mom probably doesn't care about education. Maybe she's out late partying, she's sleeping in. She ended up doing a relationship building home visit with that family. And what she learned completely changed her assumptions. She learned that every single morning, that young mom was outside the school building with her little boy in plenty of time for him to walk in, but he had horrible anxiety and he couldn't do it. And she was doing everything we know to do as parents, you know, begging, pleading, threatening, bribing, all of those things that we try to do. And he just couldn't do it. When the teacher learned that, she was able to get the family in touch with the school counselor. And the teacher now meets the little boy at the front door and he's able to walk in and go to class. So if we are able to really meaningfully communicate with families, it can really change the way we view them and actually enrich our lives. And then finally, families can be our most powerful partners. And we certainly saw this at the beginning of the pandemic. So we talk a lot about what the knowledge that families have, but we actually have a lot of knowledge and information that families really need. We can explain the increasingly complex world of education. You know, when it came time for me to get my kids into college, I was almost, even though I went, I was almost unable to help because everything has changed. And for families who are busy working and providing for their children and caring for their children, it is impossible to keep up with all of the changes in education. And yet, you know, for educators, it's our jobs to do that. So if we can keep up with the changes and communicate them in a clear and concise way, we can ensure that families are brought into the learning. We can make schools less scary and overwhelming for parents. I'm sure I don't have to tell all of you, a lot of our families didn't have really positive school experiences. So it takes every bit of courage and deep breathing that they can muster to walk through our school building doors. If we're able to build that relationship, we can make them feel welcome so that they bring their expertise. And then finally, we can help parents feel they have someone they can turn to for help raising their children. Who here has kids? Maybe you guys can a quick Y in the chat or raise your hand. You know what I say with my kids? I mean, half the time I feel like I'm just making this up. You know what I mean? Like we hardly know what we're doing. Yeah, a lot of us are parents. I always say I'm just going to try to keep it between the ditches. Like that's the best I can do. And I guess, when we don't necessarily have those places where we can kind of network with each other anymore. And so let's say we've got a middle school parent who's concerned because all of a sudden, their child isn't necessarily moving in the direction, that they need him to move. Yeah, that can make you feel like you're not doing a good job as a parent. But as educators, we are actually experts in child development. So we can say to that parent, you know what, this is exactly what your child should be doing, should be kind of spreading their wings a little, right? And kind of exerting their independence. And in fact, you are doing a good job. And here is the role that you can play right now, at this age for your child. So we can give them that information that can reinforce what every parent needs, that, you know what, you're doing a good job. Everything's okay. Why does communication matter? It can build educational equity. And then finally, in my opinion, most importantly, it can help us build a kinder world. So I want to stop right here and ask you guys another question. Have you ever been in a meeting or maybe renting an apartment or buying a home or signing up for health insurance or even in the doctor's office where you didn't understand something? So has anybody been in that position? Yes. Yeah. So my question to you is, did you say something? And maybe a lot of you did. But for the rest of you, smile and nod. I know you're kind of like, I get it. Yeah, no. For the most part, no, pretended I know, right? And you're trying to figure it out in context. So as we get going on all of the tips, what I want you to remember is parents won't tell you if they don't understand. I mean, they just won't. And they won't tell you if they feel overwhelmed. They'll just simply disengage. Or worse, we won't see them. They won't answer our phone calls. They won't come to the school. So keep that in mind. Okay, enough of me talking. So every 10 minutes or so, we're going to be doing a little activity because that's actually best practice in communication. So what I want you guys to do is put on your parent hat and read the following welcome message from a school website homepage. Okay, so this is probably the first exposure perhaps that families have to the school. In the chat, type words you think your parents might not understand. And I say might because we don't want to underestimate them. And then type one word to describe how your parents might feel reading this message. Okay, so fire up your fingers. We ready? Here you go. Paradigm. Yep, stopped you in your tracks. Absolutely. Exemplified. Yep. Sell. Yeah, right there. What is that? Experiential learning. Yeah, you guys are great. So how would you feel if you were a parent? Like you want to partner with the school. How are you going to feel reading this? Shame. Yeah. Confused. Overwhelmed, lost, alienated. That's a good one. Not sure where I would start. Right. Do I belong here? That one's perfect. Guilt for not knowing, inadequate. Yeah, all of those things. You guys are great. Okay, so now I want you to read this one. Just tell me what you think about this one. How are we feeling about this? Accessible, welcome. It is a bit wordy. Yep. Friendly, much better, engaging. Yeah, inviting, welcoming. This one literally says, we know you're the expert, right? So you feel that you've got a place in this school, inclusive partnership. Yeah. And the first one I really did pull off a website, and so this is, just a great example of how we can communicate in ways that build relationships. Great. So what we're going to do is kind of deconstruct this as we go along. Thank you so much, you guys, for communicating. All right, so for participating like that. So why are we not always good at communicating? We're going to do a quick little pictorial history here. So this is the Dictionary of Special Education Jargon. Mr. Green prepares for his child's IEP meeting. We love our jargon in education, don't we? We love our big words. We do. And I did a training the other day and somebody said, do you think that's because we sound smart? I was like, maybe. But these big words that we use can really form barriers when it comes to family. What's an IEP, right? Yes, that's exactly what a parent would wonder. So the issue is, a lot of fields have its own internal language. The issue is when we use this language outside of speaking with each other, again, it can form those barriers. Yes, needs assessment, empowerment, rural appraisal, mainstreaming. I have no idea what he's talking about. I just want to help. Different subject, but again, those big words can be very alienated. On the advice of his readers, Jeffrey decided to adopt a more formal writing style. Sometimes we feel like we have to be very formal and we adopt a very formal tone because after all, we are professional. But in fact, this really formal tone can form a barrier. It actually can be very intimidating, just like the bow tie he's wearing. Woman drowns in school-related emails. We can overwhelm parents. So it's up to us to be able to kind of pare down our information to what is essential. No one has a big attention span anymore. So give me what I need to know in a clear, concise way. We don't have time sometimes. We don't have time to really sit and craft our communications, to really put some thinking into what we're saying or what we're writing. Let's work on your communication style. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily get a communication class or have a strong education background. The good thing is you can learn how to become a strong communicator. And so congratulations for all of you for participating tonight in this webinar. You've taken a good first step. And then finally, this is what I think is one of the biggest reasons. My last comment appeared to invite feedback. Do not be fooled. If we really are beginning to meaningful communicate with families, guess what? We're going to have to listen. And if we listen, we may have to change. And that can be very, very scary. Okay, here are your tips for effective communication. Keep in mind as we go through this, these are good for any audience. So I often use all this stuff with my kids and my husband and when I'm writing emails. Adaptable for any communication highway. So whether you're putting together a flyer or a Facebook post or an email or a text message, all of these tips can be incorporated into that. And adaptable for any subject, no matter how complex. Okay. I want to begin by talking about styles of communication. There's lots of different styles of communication. I like to break them down into 3. There's a very formal style. So if you think about this would be the style you'd use if you were presenting a dissertation or writing a dissertation or maybe putting together a grant report. It's very wordy, very big words, lots of complex sentences, commas, semicolons, very serious tone and no emotion. And then there's technical style, which is basically, your coffee maker instructions or your waffle maker instructions, just clear, concise, designed to motivate you to do something. So, plug in your coffee maker, fill the carafe, press the red button. Again, there's no emotion unless you're, building a relationship with your coffee maker, which I had this morning at 4:30 when I was drinking a little coffee. When we communicate effectively and when we communicate with families, we want to use a very conversational style. This is the style of broadcast journalism. And what it comes down to is basically the way you talk, but not the way you talk to people who are in education with all that jargon and acronyms and big words, but the way you would talk to your best friend. somebody outside of education, or your grandmother with no education background. It's clear, concise, understandable, and simple. Easy to digest. It can include humor, and it makes that emotional connection very human, very real. So that it's that added bit of emotion that really makes a communication effective. So here are some examples. Here's a very formal. Please contact the school to request assistance. So if we were to kind of write that in a very conversational way, this is what it would look like. Please reach out if you need help, right? Isn't that how that's how we would say it. I'm writing to draw your attention to the fact that your child has missed 8 days from school. Just a note to let you know your child has missed 8 days of school, right? That would be a more conversational way. And here's the last one. Martricia School understands there are instances when a student may need assistance with meal funds, therefore the following guidelines will apply. Very formal, no emotion. Here are the rules if you need help with meal charges, right? So clear, concise, effective, and the way we talk. Remember, when we're simplifying our communication, we're not dumbing it down. The information is as complex as ever. We're simply conveying it in a way that's understandable. So I am certain everyone on here today could understand rocket science if somebody explained it to us using conversational style. Clear, concise, words we understand, and with that emotional connection. We never want to underestimate our family's abilities to understand. They can. The responsibility is on us to communicate effectively. Here are your conversational style tips. My number one tip, don't use a $5 word when a 50-cent word will do, right? Good old Mark Twain. Here are a whole bunch of $5 words. Positive behavior intervention, support, decision-making framework, integration, implementation, behavioral outcomes. You know, I say climates, like take a word like that. That's a word that sneaks its way into our communications, but our families don't come home and say the climate in the produce section at the grocery was crazy today, right? It's just not a word we use. Cohorts, yeah. It's just not a word we use out here in the real world, but it sneaks its way into our communications. So if we're not going to use the $5 words, what are we going to do? We're going to translate those. So what is an assessment anyway for a parent? It's a test. What is data? That's information. Differentiated instruction. Lessons designed just for your child. Learning tailored to your child. I love this one. Inclement weather. You know, we love that one. What do we say here on the street? Stormy weather, snowy weather, bad weather, severe weather, right? And then guardian. We use the term guardian a lot, but I love the term caregiver because you know what? The people who love and care for our children are not guarding them. They're caring for them. And that just that little change, guardian to caregiver, gives you that emotion and that acknowledgement in addition to being a little bit more truthful. Okay. Fire up your fingers. Here's your next activity. We're going to read the $5 words on the screen and translate them into a 50-cent word or words, okay? And type the word or the words that you would use in the chat. Ready? Here we go. Here's your first word, curriculum. Please let me know if you would like to look over this year's math curriculum. Math subjects. Content, plan, program, activities. Look at you guys. Lesson plans. Yep. Great. Learning. This year's math learning. This year's math lessons. Math work. Terrific. I came up with teaching materials, learning materials, teaching tools. Great. Look at you superstars. All right. Here's your next one. Excluded. Your child will be excluded from school. Your child will be excluded if they don't have their vaccinations. Your child will be excluded. Not allowed in school. Right, that's very conversational. Left out of school. I love left out because who would want that? You don't want your child left out. Asked to leave. Yep, we're unable to go to school. Yeah, absolutely. Excluded sounds so scary. Your child will have to stay home. You don't want that, right? But I love what you guys have come up with. Let's see, a lot of that is even more positive. Unable to attend. Yep. All right. Last one. This is a doozy. This week, we're discussing post-secondary possibilities with your student. I did not know what this meant until I started working at my school corporation. I mean, who uses this word? What are post-secondary possibilities? Career choices, future plans. Yes. Terrific. Pathways, work plans, career paths. Yes, absolutely. That's what post-secondary is. After high school possibilities, college and career and job opportunities, options after secondary school. Yes, absolutely. Do you see how easy that is? But we just get in a rush and we just don't think about stuff like that. You guys are great. Okay. Keep in mind, the simpler the words, the more easily they're translated and understood in other languages. So, when it comes to translating a word like post-secondary or a word like fluency, that's very difficult to do. So if we can write in a very clear, concise way using simple words, it'll make it a lot easier to translate what we've put together. And just to put a punctuation mark on this, our superintendent in our district was talking about how we were going to reopen schools, and he kept talking about keeping kids in groups. But he kept using the term cohort. So one of our parents said, "Can you explain what a cohort is?" It's been mentioned many times, but some may not know what it means. So our parents will tell us if we ask. Your number 2 tip, avoid acronyms. Here are a whole bunch of acronyms. I got this email after I started working for my district. I had no idea what this meant. I said, I'm happy to help, but you got to translate this for me. So when it comes to acronyms, sometimes we send this home. These are special education terms here in the US. And this, I would say, is not very helpful, because we can say a BIP is a behavior intervention plan, but that still doesn't explain what it is. And the word intervention is very scary. That can be very scary to tell a child, your student, your child's going to go to an intervention, right? So what we have to do is actually define the term. So don't just say the words that the letters stand for. Go ahead and define it. A BIP is a behavior intervention plan. The plan will work on together to make sure your child has what they need to be successful. That's what it is, right? So that brings them into the learning versus giving them the acronym and just the words. Your number 3 tip, use you, your child, your school, your student, and we. So here's your next activity. If you are comfortable, please close your eyes or just listen very closely as I read a couple different statements to you, and think about how you're feeling as I read the statements, okay? Here we go. Parents can pick up their students after the event. You can pick up your child after the event. The school works to help every student succeed. We work to help your students succeed. Okay, you can open your eyes. Did you guys sense a difference? And if so, what was that? You go ahead and put it. The second was more personal. Directional, not relational. You felt a connection. Yeah, and a partnership. There is research that if a test question is written, Johnny goes down to buy a loaf of bread, or that question is written, you go down to buy a loaf of bread, children will actually score higher on the one written with the you, because their brains think it's in a conversation. So they think it's going to have to respond. So that is one really little change you can make immediately to ensure that your communications are not only conversational, but more engaging. Simple little change, big impact. Okay, let's move on to what to communicate. We want to get in that space of communicating just right. In broadcasting, we talk about communicating for the ear because we are communicating in the spoken word in a conversational style. For our purposes, the ear can represent your attention span, okay? The ear can only digest 1 fact per sentence. That's actually how we speak. We generally speak 1 fact per sentence. The ear quits listening when it takes too much effort. I'm sure you guys have been in a in a speech or something where you start thinking, I wonder what I'm having for lunch. You know, your mind tends to wander. Hopefully that's not happening to you right now. And the ear's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. You know, I read the other day, we have a shorter attention span now than a goldfish. Goldfish can hold their attention for 12 seconds and ours is down to 8. And that is largely due to these. Which brings me to my next point. The ear reads on the phone. So we sit on our computers and we design our flyers or we craft our emails, but our families are opening on their phone. And I was working with a school a couple months ago, and I'm not sure you guys can see this, but they send home a weekly email, and I am just gonna kind of do this, and I'm gonna ask you, are your parents, oops, hold on, I messed up. Okay, so are your parents are they still reading? Probably not. I'm sure we've all experienced where you open an article, you want to read it, you read the first 2 paragraphs and then you move on. So here's a couple of tips for that. Number 1, if you've put something together on your computer, send it to yourself and open it on your phone and make sure it looks readable. And then the second point with that is put the most important information up at the top. So this email that I just showed you had an invitation to a really important meeting at the school. Parents never saw it. They never got that far in the email. I find it helpful to think about tiering my information. So what we want to do is strive for the tier 1, universal communication, which is the minimal basic information presented in a clear, concise way that allows everyone to participate in the learning. At tier 2, of course, we're going to have, information that people want, people want more information, or maybe we have to reach out to those families in a different way. And then at the top tier are really those one-on-one communications tailored to individuals who need a higher level of support to bring about understanding. In broadcasting, we've got to tell you what we need to tell you in 30 seconds. What we used to say is, if you want to know more, you can read about it in the newspaper, but you have the minimal basic information that you need. So that's what we want to strive for. In order to do that, we have to kind of cull the herd. We have to pare down the information to what is absolutely essential. So you do that, number 1, by thinking, who's my audience? If you just keep your audience in mind, you will immediately begin to kind of focus in your information. And then think to yourself, what's the specific purpose of the communication? And if you can compose a sentence in your head, that will help you focus. And then think, what are the 2 or 3 things you want people to take away? Because chances are that's all they'll remember. When I used to do live shots, I always just had 2 or 3 things I wanted to say. And then I moved on, or I let the anchor ask me some questions, because that was all anybody was really going to remember anyway. Don't give them 5 and hope they get the top 3 that are really important. Prioritize information that will help bring families into the learning. And, families that will help, information that will help families support learning at home, information that will help build relationships, and information that will help them advocate for their children. You can leave out lots of details. Parents want to know more, they'll ask, right? They'll have the minimal that they need to know to participate. Leave out unnecessary background information. This is what I call inside baseball, stuff that, parents don't necessarily need to know. And then information you can give them at a later time or another communication. If we can dole it out in bite-sized chunks, we're more likely to get that information through. Include emotion, because again, that's where that real connection happens. If we're going to ask parents to do something, always explain why. When my son was in elementary, he brought home this piece of paper. He said, "Mommy, I need to read this and you need to mark where I make a mistake." And I was like, okay, so we did it. I had no idea what I was doing. Then he said, "Now we need to do it again." And I thought, well, that really makes no sense, but we did it again. Only after I started working in schools did I know we were working on fluency. We were working on, I was working with him so that he would have smooth reading, and not read with stopping and starting. If I'd known that, I would have done that during our reading time together, but I never knew why we did that activity. Always include an ask, because education is a partnership. So if we're going to provide, the summer school, all we ask is for you to sign your child up. Include how, because, you know, oftentimes it's nice to give parents examples on how to have the conversation or how to get the learning started. You know, it is a very beautiful way to kind of increase their abilities, you know, to do that on their own time. And then finally, include a thank you, because as we talked about earlier, being a parent can, you know, sometimes be a thankless job, and we should celebrate every level of engagement. Okay, your next activity. We're going to read the following description of a program to help students who didn't finish high school, which is kind of our secondary school here. So think about that for a second. Think about that audience. They were not successful in school. These are the kids who are 16, 17, 18 who dropped out. Pick at least one fact that you feel is not necessary to include in this program description. So this is that inside baseball. And then type that fact into the chat. And there is more than one. Oops. Here we go. You'll also see a lot of $5 words. Those will begin to bother you. What can we take out of this? What can we pare down? Licensed teachers, I certainly hope so. Right? Facilitate recovery or advancement. There's one that's really big. All of sentence number 2. Yes, automated. Apex learning, yes. You could go through the whole thing and never know it's Apex learning, right? That's so unimportant. Comprehensive digital curriculum. Yeah. And when you look at, you know, automated progress reports each week, you know, that actually may be a negative. Like, we don't need that fact, but that actually may discourage some kids, right? Okay, so you now know how we roll. Here is your after. What do we think about this one? What do we think? It's pared down. Yes, supportive. So does the first one make you feel like you could do it? I mean, think about these kids, right? Yeah, it makes sense. It's easy to follow. It's welcoming. Yeah, absolutely. It's encouraging. So we pared down all the information, but we also included, you know, that it's easy, right? I mean, the goal of this communication ultimately is to get them to call us, just to get them interested. And the first one makes it sound like, yeah, the first one would frighten them off. This one actually makes it sound doable. So if we look at them side by side, we're still including the subjects, we're still including it's online, we're still including that teachers are going to be there, so you're not doing it by yourself. But the second one makes it sound doable. And if we put that in our little triangle, you can see how we've kind of dispersed the information. So online learning teachers, you can graduate lots of classes and easy, right? The rest of it is for those, they can learn it in another time, or, you know, if they have more questions, we can explain it, right? But we just want them to call us. So let's give them just the basic information. All right, let's move on now to talk a little bit about the tone we use. Tone is super important. Nonverbal communication, tone and body language make up between 65 and 85% of communication. So it really is not what you say, but how you say it. So when it comes to tone, here's the definition. But what I want you to realize is there is emotion in 2 places. There's emotion on the part of the person who is doing the communicating. And then there's emotion on the part of the person receiving the communication. So we need to keep both of those in mind as we're crafting our communication. Where am I emotionally? And where might be the person that I'm communicating with? Where might they be emotionally? Okay. All right, we're going to start with an example here. So keep your fingers on your keyboards. Put on your parent hat. Read the following information about school busing sent home the first day of school. So it's the first day of school. There's not a person involved in education that doesn't feel good that first day of school, right? We're all like, this is gonna go great. I mean, you have that kind of fresh start, okay? As you read it, think about the tone. So what is the tone? Maybe capture in one word. What's the feeling of the person who wrote it? So what is the emotion on the part of the person doing the communicating? And how might it be perceived by parents? So what would the emotion be on the part of the receiver of the information? Here it is. Ooh. How do we feel about this? It's authoritative, serious, and strict. So what do you suppose to, yes, stern and formal, it's scary. It is. So how do you think this person feels about families? How do they feel? It's just negative. Yeah. I feel like they've put walls up. Yeah. Don't mess with us. Ooh. You feel like you've already done something wrong and you haven't even started, right? They're not responsible for behavior. Yeah, there's nothing about this. So how would parents, so I think you guys have captured this. Parents would be kind of scared, right? You feel like you're in trouble. So again, this is the first day of school and already you feel like threatening families are a problem. Okay, so now we're gonna go from that curmudgeonly to congenial, okay? How about this one? And you tell me if we're saying the same thing. Yes. Why can't it be this way? Right? Love that they asked, right? We talked about including an ask. So we're asking parents for help, right? We're explaining why. Remember we talked about how important it is to include why? And then, teamwork, partnership. And then, if something happens, let's just say, on the off chance that something happens, we're going to reach out. But we're not like automatically telling everyone you're in trouble. We're going to reach out one by one. If issues come up, but we don't think they will. I mean, this one is just a lot more positive. And so on that first day of school, we're bringing families into the learning, we're building that relationship, we're creating that sense of partnership, and we are explaining why we're doing things. We're bringing them into the learning, we're taking the veil off of what we do. Yes, and it communicates shared responsibility. So when you look at them side by side, they're really essentially saying the same thing, right? So when it comes to tone, it starts with you. It starts really about, number one, how you feel about what you're communicating. Are you communicating something positive? That's going to come through in your tone. Do you have to maybe make a phone call that's not so positive or send home a letter that's not so positive? And how do you feel about that? And how do I make sure that I remain hopeful and positive in my tone? So spending some time thinking about how actually am I feeling about what I have to communicate. The second thing you do is really think about how you feel about the parents you're communicating with. And do you believe they want the best for their children? And you have to. Because if you don't, just like the person who wrote that busing email, it's going to sneak into your tone, right? Obviously, that person has had some negative experiences, and there you go. We're going to nip that in the bud this time, right? So we have to approach things with a really partnership way, and we have to feel like parents want the best for their children, because I think all of us can agree we've never met a parent that doesn't. I mean, it's just that simple. And then from a practical standpoint, how is your day? How are you doing? I mean, if you are having a really lousy day, maybe think twice about sending that email on that day. You know, I mean, oftentimes we'll walk into our school buildings and, you know, maybe the secretary looks up and says, "Can I help you?" Right? And you immediately think it's you because, you know, you just walked in. But in fact, you know, all heck may be breaking out in the office that day, but immediately you're going to think it's you. Or if, you know, you call the school and the secretary says, "Can I help you?" You immediately think it has something to do with you. So, you know, if you're having a lousy day, just understand that that's going to sneak its way into your tone, and make sure that you take some time to center yourself before you communicate. And then how do you feel in general? Are you doing your self-care? I mean, if we're all a little super stressed these days, so I think we can all afford to take a good deep breath before we communicate, you know, and just make sure that we're making that commitment to doing our self-care. And then think to yourself, what's your goal for the communication? What am I really trying to do here? And one thing I would offer up is that at the end of the day, our goal with our communications are always to build those relationships and keep those communication highways open. That is our ultimate goal. So improving tone in your written word, the first thing you can do is breathe before responding. I mean, I'm sure that you guys have maybe received an email where you start and then you're kind of like, okay, no, first I need to write, "Hi, I hope you had a great weekend," right? We've got to get that human connection, that sort of tone in there. So breathe before responding. Read your work back to yourself. This is my biggest suggestion for you. If you literally audibly read what you've written, you will feel how your tone has been conveyed. You will hear it. So oftentimes, if I am writing something at my desk, you can literally hear my voice because I'm speaking it as I'm writing it. That's how I'm ensuring it's in a conversational style. And so I can hear my tone. And then have someone else read it. When I would put stuff together for our district, I'd call in all my colleagues and say, "Can you read this and tell me, does this feel okay?" If necessary, use words to acknowledge emotions. So it's okay, you know, to say, "I know talking about, you know, this program can be scary for you." If we're able to use our words to take that emotion off the table, we can still then effectively communicate. And again, remember, your ultimate goal is to build that relationship, because what you want to do is just keep those lines of communication open. When it comes to your spoken word, again, we're going to take a deep breath. We are. And then we are going to check our emotions. And if we are having a lousy day, we are going to acknowledge that, right? And we're going to do what we can to take a breath or center ourselves before we communicate. We're going to always kind of take off our educator school hat and put on our family hat, because as we talked about, we need to be aware not only of our emotions, but the emotions on the part of our families. What might they be doing? You know, did the kids just get home from school? They've got 3 backpacks. Like me, the kids would open their backpacks. I'd be like, just zip those things right up, like the onslaught of papers. So what are they doing? What might they be doing? How might they be feeling? And what do I need to say to be able to cut through that emotion and make that connection I need to make? So you're going to think about the receiver of the information, and then bring a fresh start to every interaction. I mean, even if we've had a negative interaction with somebody, anybody, we all deserve a fresh start. I mean, look at what we've been dealing with. So let's just bring a fresh start, and let's assume positive intent to all of our conversations. And if we've done something that we are not proud of, or we've communicated something and we feel like we could have done it better, let's give ourselves a fresh start too. Let's show ourselves some grace, because we've also been doing it all. When it comes to improving your tone in the spoken word, feel friendly and calm. You know how they say if you smile, then you sound smiley and you feel smiley just if you smile? That really works. I mean, it's kind of hokey, but it really works. So take a smile, and then your tone will come across smiley. Speak slower and softer with less force. That's more approachable. You've got a lot of different cultures. Be sensitive and aware of those cultural differences. Particularly, we don't have time to talk about it today, but particularly when it comes to body language. Always express respect and thankfulness. And then remember that your ultimate goal is to build that relationship. All right, I see we have a question in the chat. So what we'll do is maybe run through the rest of it and then get to that question. So thank you for that. When it comes to checking yourself, here are my suggestions. Read your work out loud. Read it out loud. You'll see the acronyms, you'll hear the jargon and clumsy language. You can work on your tone. And you'll see that it's 1 fact per sentence, all of those conversational tips we just covered. Do a reading level check of your work. And if you don't know how to do this, ask your technology people. But what you can do is anything that you've written, you can highlight it and then figure out what is the reading level. And what we want to do is strive between like a 4th and 6th grade reading level. So, and when it comes to that, to doing a reading level check, here's my tip. Don't do a reading level check. Like, let's say you've written a letter. Don't highlight the whole letter and then do the reading level check, because it will average. So it may average out to like a 4th grade level, but there may be words that will still trip families up. So go paragraph by paragraph. So one paragraph might be 12th grade level, one paragraph might be 2nd. You're going to want to find those stumbling points, like the word paradigm that we all identified. And do it not just of the stuff you put together, but the materials you hand out and the websites you suggest, because there's nothing worse than suggesting a family go to a website and have that website be absolutely ununderstandable for them. That actually is alienating and detrimental. And then another huge suggestion, engage parents and community partners in this work. In my district, I ended up putting together a communication team, and I had all of my old journalism friends and then parents and grandparents and, you know, a very diverse group, and we worked on our communications together. And what was powerful about that was it wasn't me saying, no one can understand this. They were saying it, right? I don't like this. I don't get this. I don't understand this. This doesn't work for me. So that would be, and you don't have to create a new team. If you've got teams already working in your buildings, you know, task them with helping with communication. They'll love it. When it comes to your spoken words, check for understanding and invite questions. And I am not a big fan of, do you have any questions? Because then you're like, oh, maybe I should, right? Instead, ask it really kind of, are we good? I'm sure I didn't do a good job explaining that. What questions do you have? Like, make it really casual. And if somebody doesn't ask questions, you can say, gosh, a parent the other day asked this, right? Just so they know it's okay to ask them. And reflect before and after conversations. So think about the information you provided, your tone, and whether that communication helped you build a relationship. Never forget that the responsibility for good communication really lies with educators, because it's easier for us to push out than for parents and for the public to push in. And then remember that changing our communication practices is really just the beginning, because if we get really good at communicating, the essence of communication is listening, isn't it? So we're going to be communicating, speaking less, writing less, and listening more. We started at the beginning with this idea of how we make our way back in this moment in education, and I love this. So if you can just communicate, you can get by, but if you can communicate skillfully, you can work miracles. And I think we can all agree right now that we need miracles right now. We do. And we do that with the power of our words. And then finally, I love this. This is your funny. It's the parent janitor conference. Your kid throws up a lot. So it's not all on us, right? It's not all, it is a shared responsibility. So we know we're not in it alone. So I have a new book out, I think that Sharon mentioned at the beginning. It's called Closing the Loop. It captures all of what we've talked about today. But I also have a free resource for all of you that has I think all of the tips we talked about today. You can put your phone up to the QR code and download that and share it with your staff. So it has the tips on you and the tips on caregiver versus guardian, all of that sort of stuff. So I can leave that up if you guys want. And I see the question. Do you have a tip for a school where getting the information over clearly often is deemed more important than building relationships the instruction manual approach. So is that really about the emotion, like that's too formal of a communication? Because if that's the case, I think we can do both, right? Is there maybe a clarification? Okay, well, so anyway, I think we can do both in a really clear, concise way. We can say, thank you so much for what you do to help your students succeed, you know, while also conveying the information. Do you have any adjustments you would suggest to communicate with communities that are significantly disengaged? So when it comes to this, a lot of what we have to do are those basic, really solid family engagement practices, where we're, you know, making those positive phone calls, where we're doing those beginning of the year relationship building. A lot of that is just the family engagement kind of practices. And once we've built that relationship, we can begin to communicate. But I think when it comes to families that are already disengaged, we really, really have to come at that with an open heart, and our tone is a very, very reassuring. And I think it's okay to use our words saying, we haven't always done a good job. I mean, let's own that fact, because it's on us that they're disengaged, right? So let's own that. Let's take that off the table. Let's let them know that we recognize, you know, that it was our responsibility to keep them engaged in the first place. How do we change leadership and teachers' attitudes on this? So one of my strongest suggestions would be to show them the before and afters. Show them some of the ones that we did and just say, you know, can it be that, why can't it be this way? And I think it's really important, if parents are telling you that, hold that meeting, create that communication team, have them explain, we really do want to read it, but what you're sending home isn't working for us. Engage them, lift up their voices. Those are a couple of my suggestions. How can you rebuild communication when it's broken down? Again, that's that kind of re-engaging, you know, and really acknowledging, you know, that it was on us, you know, we realize we haven't done this well. Help us improve this. I think that those are probably I'm going to stop my sharing here and see, have I missed anything? It's, oh gosh, I guess I did.
There's a lot happening, so very easy to miss. We've had some great responses from people and questions, and a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Patricia. If there are any other questions that we haven't touched on, we might perhaps send those to you for a response at a later date. Fantastic. Well, on behalf of everybody, I'd just like to say thank you so much. It was really interesting, very informative, in a really engaging way, which is fabulous and easy to understand, which we love. So we are parents and educators on here tonight, so it's great to get a bit of perspective from both sides. For me personally, I love the fact a couple of times that you said education is a partnership, because it absolutely is. And, you know, the funds of knowledge that families hold about their children and the funds of knowledge that educators hold about the student, when you meld those together, you just get such fantastic results. So that's really terrific. Yeah, appreciate it. And personally, I like the fact that you said it's conversational, not casual, because I always feel that I write very casually, but now I'm going to say it's conversational. It's not not always seen as totally professional, probably, but I'm going to now use conversational. So I like that. Thank you.
But, you know, at the end of the day, what we're just trying to do is communicate effectively. We don't need to sound, you know, we don't need to be formal. We don't need to sound smart. We don't need to be right. At the end of the day, we just want to build that relationship, you know?
Yeah. The engagement, the relationship, the co-design, it's just also vital in helping our children. So thank you very much. And again, really appreciate you joining us so early in the morning for yourself. I hope you've got a bit of a quiet day ahead. And yeah, thank you. As I said, if there are any other questions, we'll shoot those through at some other stage.
Okay. Yep. Perfect. Absolutely.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thanks
so
everyone
much.
for joining us.
That's
And thanks.
great participation, everyone. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
good job, everybody. Thanks, Patricia. Good night, everyone.